Welcome, everybody. Really excited to see you all.
Always exciting to see you.
Good to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
How are you? Can you just say just a little bit about yourselves and how you're doing? What's up with you right now?
Jennifer, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Thank you. All right. Yeah, I'm okay, Melinda. Thank you for asking. I'm paying very close attention to our beloved field of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, and very much staying in that positive mindset of what's possible right now for innovation, for greater belonging, what could actually go right coming through this crisis, and at the same time, what we need to be educating about now more than ever in terms of disparities and the systemic issues that we have not, I think, talked more openly about, particularly in the companies that I do so much consulting in.
Yeah, I'll go next. I think I'm grieving like everybody else, right? Grieving the loss of life, grieving the loss of jobs, grieving the ignorance, grieving the uptick in discrimination and racism, loss of income, things like that. But like you, Jennifer, one of the things that at X that we operate on is what we call passionately dispassionate, which is a creative tension that brings about innovation. And one of the tensions for me in this situation is that I'm grieving, but I'm also excited because I know that we have an opportunity to lean into this new normal, because this is it, folks. Like, there's no going back. And like you mentioned in the last session, Melinda, like, that wasn't so great. Let's be honest. So what can we build? How can we lay the foundation for our future? So I'm excited by that, but also, still grieving.
Yeah, I think you took the tea right out of my cup there. So, I think that sums it up pretty well for me. I think coming into this, at first it was I was somewhat relieved in a sense. The introvert in me was happy to be a bit disconnected for a minute. And it's given me a lot of time to really sit down and process a lot of things. Some things I have not been thrilled to process, but just to be able to take some time on my own to process those things and to really start thinking about exactly what creating that new normal looks like. And that piece is exciting. It's also terrifying, if I'm going to be honest. It's just very terrifying to actually think about some of the ongoing struggles that will continue, some of the obstacles that are unknown to me right now. And just thinking about that has been good. But overall, personally, as a human being, I'm grateful, and I'm always going to carry an attitude of gratitude for continued employment and my health, my family's health. I think that's exciting for me. For the record, that wasn't me in the picture. I know that was a little confusing in the chat, but that wasn't me in that picture. That was there, I think. So that's Will, Abby, but I know you are great. So, but I want everybody to think that I was taking somebody's picture, so it's all good.
That was real. That Abby was in an earlier session. Many apologies to that for that.
No, you're I just like people was a pig, so it's like that wasn't me.
That is definitely not you. Apologies for that. That is the team working late at night, I think.
The plus side, I'm in solidarity rocking the self-done uneven haircut, and his looks a lot better than mine.
Okay, so when we're allies, we make mistakes, and we apologize for them. Apologies. So can you talk a little bit about what work looks like now? What DEI work looks like now? How is it different? What are your companies thinking about right now? What are you doing?
Yeah, I think DEI work is being done without people knowing they're doing DEI work. For example, I think one of the great things about Alphabet is that immediately sending people home and equipping folks with the ability to continue working. So giving us access to create a workstation at home. So that access right there is DEI work. They don't call it that, which is great, because I don't think everything needs to be labeled DEI all the time. It actually is a business imperative. And so like companies that have done, kind of those initial steps, great, kudos to you if you had the ability to work from home, and your company is helping you by providing, that access. But now it's like time to go a layer deeper, and really look at every single process that touches people, which is all the processes, right? So that's everything from your employment brand, onboarding. How are you onboarding people in the new virtual world? How are you training people in the new virtual world? What does performance management look like? How are we training our managers around that? What does recruiting or not recruiting look like? You should probably be pipelining. I'm thinking, future forward after this, if we're in a distributed workforce, that should give us access to greater diversity, since folks are going to be working from home. So there's so many possibilities, and at X, we're definitely taking a step back and looking at some of those key kind of employee experiences around performance management and recruiting and onboarding and all of that. So that's what we're up to over at X.
Yeah, I think similarly, we're in a position pretty early on in this process. We, made the shift to working remotely and took quite a few steps, everything from additional stipends for our workforce, making sure we were doing complete audits of a lot of our policies and practices to make sure that they were that we were, one, still able to deliver same level of service for our customers, but also making sure that our employees were taken care of, that their families were taken care of, knowing that everything was changing for everybody in ways that we could not foresee completely. And I think we've done really well at that as an organization. I'm incredibly grateful for the leadership that we've had, who's been putting together timely communications, over communicating quite a bit to the workforce, to a lot of people who are really on edge still and processing a lot of different things differently. I still think we are adjusting to kind of making sure we are still pushing out some of the same content virtually, and still making sure that we're finding ways for our workforce to continue to engage, to continue to have the same social connections that they were able to have with their colleagues. And then, of course, to continue to still be able to have some of these sometimes uncomfortable conversations that have proven to be really critical in delivering a core product, and even developing a core product. I think, to Rachel's point, one of the things that I'm looking most forward to at this point, given COVID, I've heard it said a couple times that this has been like the great equalizer in a sense, but I think that's a little far off. I think I think it's a little misguided. I get where people are coming from with that. But
yes, get the sentiment.
Yeah, but if anything, it's amplified a lot of the issues that and the inequities that we've been seeing and a lot of us have known about for I don't know how long, right? And to the point that Dr. Jordan made and Rachel's reiterated, the pre-COVID reality wasn't that great for a lot of people, and now we've seen all of these. Now the rest of the public is seeing the major disparities, not only in healthcare, but even in basic kind of skill gaps, and looking at how the labor force has been divided. Lack of access to financial services that we've seen as a result even of some of the congressional bills that have passed, and who that's been distributed to in that sense. So I think what I'm most excited about now is when we think about creating that new normal and what this DEI practice looks like, this is a necessary kick in the behind for a lot of companies to stop thinking about the DEI practice. And I know people have heard me pontificate on this for quite some time, to stop thinking about this just in terms of recruiting, right? Because that's not the extent of this practice is. And there's a huge opportunity right now to really start thinking about how critical this is to every other core function of your business, and where we as practitioners actually fit into that narrative and that conversation. So anytime, whether it's X coming up with the next greatest thing, right, there are real conversations that have to be had around, what's going to be the impact of said product on said community or said population. Are we engaging this population appropriately? For us, it's thinking through how we extend accessibility to financial services and to lending practices that are not predatory for groups who, frankly, for people who look like me. And so I'm excited to dive into driving that impact through product and really making sure that this practice stays at the forefront of our thinking as we continue on.
Yeah.
Oh, that was incredible. I'll go next. Thank you, Rachel and Ulysses. we've been doing some community calls with like 100 DEI practitioners. So hearing across the board, you know, what folks are working on. And I echo much of what you all said, that we are doing D&I work without it being named that. Rachel, I totally agree. It's like we're taking a quantum leap and everything is being accelerated right now. The clarity and the undeniability of what the truth of what we're seeing, I'm hoping people are seeing, and really like, I think this opportunity for learning right now is really intense. And so our job, I think, is to open people's aperture to the truth that they're being shown, and to never forget what we're seeing, you know, to make sure that we don't return back to an exclusionary past, but that we are the squeaky wheels in this community, making sure that this stuff stays on the radar screen and is, Ulysses, to your point, like baked in to whatever we build that's next, you know, that is baked in. I mean, maybe this is the opportunity for us to, like we always talk about, not have DEI sidelined as this, you know, special effort, right? That's disconnected from the business case and from other product development and all those other things. So I'm choosing to look at it that way. I am also terrified that we will get sidelined as a function. I see all the churn amongst jobs in the D&I world, but I also know I just saw a list recently of 80 open D&I jobs. So I was really excited about that. And I'm happy to share. and Melinda, I think, has a wonderful job board too. I want to bring up what ERGs and affinity groups are doing right now. I think what's so fascinating about this moment is there's invisible aspects of diversity that have been deeply hidden and stigmatized in our workplaces that are coming to the fore. And so more kinds of diversity are being normalized. At least they're being discussed. We'll see if they're going to be normalized. I mean, that's our job, to make sure that like mental health, parenting, and flex, the exposure that fathers are getting right now to the emotional labor of household duties. Everything we're learning right now about what's being, this transparency that we're being given is, I think, part of ERGs are certainly morphing to be more intersectional. And we're finally, I think, also, I hope, turning that corner of having an intersectionality lens on everything we do, programming-wise, education-wise, that we're siloed as needed by identity, but at the same time, we're discovering what's shared across so many communities. And so, yeah, I think it's a cool time of, as I said, acceleration, but it's also tremendously, sorry for the sirens. Like somebody said, the sounds of sirens is a moment for reflection for all of us. But yeah, it's, Melinda, I'm excited about what I'm hearing. We're flexing, we're adjusting, we're trying to maintain a seat at the table, I think, so that we can influence key decision makers. I mean, now is the proving moment of have we built those relationships so that we can influence what's next? And that's my deepest hope for this whole conversation, is that we are consulted, we are at the table, we are heard, we are listened to, and we're not forgotten. And I think there's an interesting opening counterintuitively right now for that.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback onto what you were saying about the quantum leap that's happening right now. And I always consider this job to be a curator of experiences. Like, I am here to introduce and illuminate for the dominant culture some of what the experience is like for underrepresented groups. And I couldn't have curated anything like this, right? This is a time where things are absolutely being illuminated. And I think it's time for CDOs, EID, DIB, whatever you call yourself, the person who is leading this charge in your company, or even those working groups who are passionate about it, to lean into this experience that we are all having. And like you said, never forget it. And so when you said, like, build the relationships we built, now is the time to build those relationships, because we're all having a great global shared experience. And it's so much easier for me to build relationships with folks I haven't had a chance to or had an opportunity to before, because right now we're all going through something. So my opener for folks is the question of, how are you? What's going on with you? And that creates a deep connection. And right now, with what's going on in the news, it's easy to point to, do you see what's happening to this particular community? You know, how is that playing out in the workplace? And then, as you mentioned, activating our ERGs to, one, create a support system for themselves. And a real example, Hyphen, which is our Asia Pac ERG, first got together in the early days because we know that there has been discrimination against the Asian community because of what's going on in the pandemic. And after kind of supporting one another in a safe space, they decided it was very important for them to tell their story of what was happening to them, both personally and to others in their community, and then provide resources. So we reached out to Michelle Kim, our beloved Michelle Kim, we all know, who gave me a 57-page, thanks Michelle, a 57-page resource to share with our leaders. And we got them some airtime at our all hands. And they told their story and they shared the resource. Like those are the moments that EID leaders could not curate, that we live for. And now is the time to really lean into those opportunities.
So, Jennifer, you talked about this a bit, that starting to see that in some cases, as often is the case when there's some kind of a crisis, we're seeing reductions in D&I budgets. We're seeing hiring, no more hiring happening, sometimes layoffs, and then also some D&I people are losing their positions. So with scarce resources, there are still things that we can do around diversity, equity, inclusion. Just because you don't have a budget doesn't mean you can't create change, right? And so if you all could talk about some of the things that you can do with a limited or no budget even, I think that would be really helpful for some people on the call that don't have a budget yet, or that are seeing their budgets squashed, or and they're just struggling with what to do now.
I'd love to hear Rachel and Ulysses. There's one example I wanted to give. Toyota is a partner of ours, and they have, one of their many strategies is they have a 200-person advocate list, all aspiring allies, all people who said, like, let me help be the arms and legs and help activate messaging and education and communication, and like anything that needs to be activated and pushed out, we're here. Like, that's their job. And I just thought, what a perfect example of a totally budgetless effort, and a way also to propagate ally learning and education. You know, to have this group of 200 people in a certain company to be the arms and legs and eyes and ears and also the learner in the process is a beautiful thing. So it just struck me that, like, a lot of these strategies take no money at all. It's really thinking through strategically, like, okay, so what are the assets in my organization? How do I activate them? How should I structure them, you know, in different groups? You know, but a lot of this is really more sort of, I'd say, organizational design thinking, thinking about in different audiences and what they need and where they are in their learning journey and how you can build something that takes them there. So it's not always, like we laugh about in the world of ERGs, it's not always food, fun, and famous people. It's like, yes, it's cultural celebration, right? I know, we say it lovingly. It's like meant with like so much love. But it's not always the, you know, Cinco de Mayo is awesome, right? Virtual Cinco de Mayo, like, you know, like famous authors coming in, yes, to all that. But Ulysses, you brought up, like, the business case for this stuff is important for especially important for DEI right now. We have to attach our agenda to the business's pain points. I think now more than ever, we've got to figure out, what are they most uncertain about, and how can we bring a solution to that? And I think that if we can do that, we can insert ourselves right now in a very unique way, and make sure we're embedded going forward, which has always been our goal. Not to disappear and be embedded, but to be embedded, you know, in sort of a permanent, like the DNA of quote unquote business as usual, which I hate. My friend says it's now business as us, which I really like. Yeah, it's lovely. So there are lots you can do, but Ulysses or Rachel, I would love to hear what you think about the whole question of budget, because it's I guess what gets funded gets taken seriously. I mean, I guess in some people's minds, but you know, so I don't want to discount the importance of money either.
Yeah, I don't either, but I've always had a very, very slim budget. And so I'm used to being scrappy, if you will. So, you know, all of, Melinda, you know, I mean, a lot of the work, a lot of the systemic change work is $0. What it is maybe you're spending your social capital, maybe back to the relationship building, you're going to spend a little bit of that going back and forth with folks to, you know, edge in some equity for everybody, but all of this work right now is free. It's taking no dollars for me to work with our L&OD team to put together a very, you know, intentional workshop for our hiring managers on how to be more inclusive as leaders in a distributed work model. So free all day, and I'm here for that all day, because systemic change is what's going to last beyond us and beyond this pandemic. So all day. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is even just little things like an all hands. What do all hands feel like? And I, you know, kind of thinking back to like walking into this big, massive space, and you've got all these people, and you're like, well, at least I do. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And you're seeing all your friends, and you get to see the diversity, no matter how little or how much you have. You at least get to see and connect. And in this medium, it's just one way, to be quite fair. Most people are live streaming if it's over a certain amount. And so, you know, I had a great conversation with the curators of our all hands meetings of like, hey, so how can we make sure that visually we're seeing the diversity that we do have, that we're amplifying some of those folks who we don't typically hear from, that we're using closed captions. Like Melinda, you set such a great example for folks on how to really curate an inclusive experience for people in a virtual world. So, you know, those are the types of things like I immediately, and that was a free conversation. I didn't charge them anything for that.
I think you bring up such great points. I feel like a bobblehead because I'm like, yup, the whole time. But I think it's critical. This is a critical conversation to be had. And, you know, in other places I've been at, it was like, who's a budget? What's a budget? We don't know her. Who is she?
Right.
And you know, I'm grateful that I'm at an organization that has absolutely invested in me personally, has invested in this practice. And I didn't walk into a situation where I was beating my head up against a wall and still trying to explain the business case. Right? This was, they were like, no, we need more. Right, we need more, and we need you to do more. Shout out to Yvette Steele, who just wrote something in the chat. But I think that piece is so critical to me. But budget is not everything. Right now I'm not experiencing a major cut, and fortunately we're not laying anybody off. If anything, we're actually hiring quite a bit more right now. Mm-hmm. But I think the structural piece is so important. And oftentimes we get so consumed and lost in a lot of the challenges that happen in this practice that it's easy to lose sight, right, of some of the easy free things we can do. And particularly from the perspective of an organization, organizations don't leverage their platforms enough to be that ally on an organizational level. I think right now we're in a position and we have an opportunity, right, to, especially with everything going on, we're in financial services, right? We touch home ownership in the mortgage process. This is an opportunity for us to leverage not only our technology platform to help provide additional access to populations who have typically, you know, been underbanked and underserved, mm-hmm. and frankly, people who look like me who don't trust a bank, right? Since the financial crisis, especially, I know people who still hide money under mattresses, right? That's a reality, right? Yeah. So how do we help partner with banks and financial institutions to help bridge that gap and rebuild that trust and still empower these communities who have not had that so far? It's also an opportunity for us to take a look at the regulatory landscape and think through. We know financial services has long been archaic, has long been a little outdated, and has long been inaccessible to a lot of people. Is there an opportunity for us now to say, well, yes, the FICO score in and of itself, using that as a barometer for anybody to determine anybody's creditworthiness, especially when those people have historically been denied employment and educational opportunities,
Right.
right, to get the things that lead to creditworthiness. Since they haven't had that, how can we advocate with our access to regulatory agencies to change that, to examine different models, to provide things to help drive change in this sector that will grant people some of that access. That's what an organization can do, right? I know Alphabet does a whole lot more. Y'all got entire agencies dedicated to this. I know y'all do a whole lot more, but I think organizations have to start thinking a bit more strategically and start thinking outside of the box right now. It doesn't have to be we spend $1 million on throwing huge global events for everybody, right? That doesn't have to be everybody's reality. That's not everybody's reality.
Yeah.
Other things we could do that make that long-lasting systemic change that Rachel's talked about.
So this group is amazing. For 25 minutes, we've addressed 2 questions. So we're almost out of time. So what I want to do is we're actually out of time, but I'm going to extend my time a bit, and just because you're awesome, and I think this is really important. So if you could just say 2 things that you think we will take from where we are now into the future. What is the new, different normal in the future? What are 2 things that you think we'll take from here and move into there?
Yeah, I'm excited about the distributed workforce model. I watched companies like GitHub years and years ago when they initially started off with like no one in the office. And our minds were blown, right? We're like, what is this? This is crazy. Now look at us. And it's been illuminating for a lot of companies who previously thought you needed to be in the office. I need to see what this person and human being is doing every day in order for them to produce and innovate. And so I'm excited that that is also going to open up my ability to tap into the global talent that's available, right? So no more excuses around diversity, because we can have folks all over the globe working from home productively. We've proven that. So I'm excited that that's probably going to be one of the outcomes from this whole thing.
Yeah, I think every DEI person should be keeping an eye on management, the reworking of sort of management orthodoxy. Like holacracy is something that's always inspired me, which is what Zappos has implemented. The democratization of work is really, I think, what we could see. We could see power to a lot of us to work when we want to, how we want to. We could see less covering in the workplace, because some people are sharing with me that I feel like I somehow can reach a different level of trusting others with my truth in this new world, because perhaps the threat level is a little different or very different. So all the covering behaviors and all the sort of image consciousness and perfectionism that a lot of us bring into workplaces that weren't built by and for us has been a burden. It's been exhausting to us. It's hurt our productivity, our engagement, our loyalty, our ability to collaborate. I mean, everything. So if we could have in this virtual world an ability to just be like based on our work and our contribution and not what my appearance triggers in somebody else, like imagine what would be unleashed in terms of our working relationships, in terms of valuing our differences. So while I think the transparency is somewhat intrusive for some of us because we don't want to be on display and we may be very uncomfortable with our life and how we live and other people knowing really who we are, that stripping that away is good for all of us. Risky, yes. Uncomfortable, yes. But tremendous in terms of our, our professional happiness, our unleashing of our purpose, all that. So I'm kind of holding that as something I'm super hopeful for.
Yeah, I think it's well said. I think part of when I hear you say that, it's like, to me, it's authenticity and being your full authentic self in the workplace has taken on an entirely new meaning right now.
That's for sure. Like it or not.
I'm gonna show up in my bonnet next
yeah.
time.
People have gotten a different look for me before, but I think I really want to hone in on kind of the previous conversation and just reminding not only practitioners in this space, but just everybody else who might be in other parts of the organization who are doing a lot of this work and not realize it, that there are so many other ways to drive this social change and to drive impact that don't have to have the label of diversity all over it for you to do that don't require those funds. And I know it's easy to look out and look across the landscape and see all the obstacles in front of us and get a little overwhelmed about where to start. But I think there are at least small opportunities and small victories that we can take. One thing I don't want us to lose sight of in this kind of new adjusted distributed model, and I know it's something Rachel wanted to talk about in our kind of pre-chat, was about performance management. And I know we don't have time to go in there now, but one of the things that I know we've been talking about quite extensively with Yvette White, who's at Blend, is making sure that, particularly for women in leadership, right? This goes broadly, but I'm going to hone in on women in leadership positions. There are a lot of people who really depended on having a physical presence in the office and being able to be seen by their leaders, right? Because so often people are not given those same opportunities for projects and to take on things. And I don't want for any parents and caregivers to be overlooked for projects. I don't want people who now do not have that same level of exposure to leadership regularly to be denied opportunities for advancement in the organization. And so I just want us to make sure that we are still continuing to think critically about what it means for people to show up, and that we're creating opportunities for people to take on stretch projects, to grow their skills, to continue to develop themselves over this period, so that people are still, right, so that we're able to still start to eliminate some of those gaps that still do exist. So those would be my takeaways. So
thank you. Thank you, all three of you, for doing the work that you do, for being amazing. I echo Dan in the comments, says, y'all are amazing. This is the positive conversation I needed to hear today. And I agree wholeheartedly. We're out of time. I want to share my screen really quickly and just make sure that we are really clear who was on the panel.
How did you do that?
I am such a great multitasker. Everything. Yes, you have no idea how many hats I'm wearing right now. This is so appreciate you all. Appreciate you joining us and doing the work you do and being who you are. Thank you.
Thanks for creating the space.
Thank you so much.
Love you.
See you.
Bye.